everyone, to a new episode of Jason Talks About. And on this episode, Jason talks about the week in AEW. That includes AEW Dynamite on January 1st, right on New Year's Day. And the first big, what they're calling the mother of all simulcasts. Their debut, where they're going to be streaming at the same time on Max. Going forward, Dynamite and Collision. This is going to be happening for both shows. I'm also going to be covering some of Collision from January 4th. But before I get started, I'm your host, Jason Medeiros. The music you hear at the top, Reality 508. Get them wherever you get music. And please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Talk to us in the comments. And follow us on social media at Jason Talks About. And just about every place you can go on social media, I'm there. All right, so let's get into it. AEW Dynamite, January 1st, 2025, first day of the new year. So here's how my AEW experience started. It was New Year's Day, so I was kind of busy with stuff, and I was watching a little bit behind. I didn't watch live. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me go on Max and watch from there. Here was my experience with Max. And I'm not necessarily blaming AEW for this, but if I was them, I would be having a serious talk with the HBO, with the Max people. I keep saying HBO Max. I know it's just Max. Sorry. So here's what happened. I go on Max. I say, okay, I'm going to watch AEW. Now, this is their big debut. Mother of all simulcasts, right? Is how they're selling it. I go onto my Max dashboard thinking, logically, right? It's going to be right there. It's got it right, like Disney Plus, for example. Right now, the big new Star Wars show is Skeleton Crew. You go on Disney Plus, right on the big dashboard, you're going to see new episodes of Skeleton Crew every Tuesday, blah, 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 right? I had to search. I looked all over the front page and didn't see AEW. So I went into the search bar, and I had to put in AEW, and then AEW popped up. So we're not off to a good start. Then I click on AEW Dynamite, the new episode. All right, okay. And then I hear, I'm so excited by the Pointer Sisters. No offense to the Pointer Sisters or the song itself. That is not a wrestling song in my estimation. I don't think it sounds good for a wrestling song. And I'm quite frankly was thinking, is this some kind of a mistake or joke, or did they screw up the sound on HBO, on Max? Well, I did get my answer when everybody started talking, because it was in Spanish. Now, at first I thought, I must have spaced out for a minute, for a couple of seconds. Maybe they said, let's throw to our Spanish announce team real quick, or something, like they do in WWE. Nope, it was in Spanish. So I went to the settings, and it was stuck on Spanish for some reason. I went to my profile to make sure it was set to English. It was. I went back to AEW. It was in Spanish. So that was my Max experience. I don't know. Please let me know in the comments if anyone else had a bad experience, but that's what mine was. So at that point, I said, screw it. Got out of there, went into my YouTube TV instead, and just watched it like I always do as I record it. So they did not get much of my simulcast, but I guess they got whatever it counts for when I view on YouTube TV. All right, so let's get down to the card. I just wanted to talk about that. So not a good start. I don't know if it was something with my specific Max. I don't know how that works. I don't think it would be that way. I would think that more people would have issues. Certainly, I'm not the only one. I'm sure that couldn't just find it. But so let's get down to the show. They started off with a Mox promo. John Moxley after World's End. So this is after the pay-per-view. They're showing the footage now. He's talking about bullets flying, and he took bullets for the company, and he's mad at Adam Copeland. And the John Moxley promos make very little sense to me. That's about the main points I could pull out of it, that he wants Adam Copeland because he interfered in his business and whatever. Then they go to rated FTR backstage, is what they're calling themselves. So the FTR and Cope, as he's now known as, Cope. I guess we're going to have to all cope with that terrible name. All right, that was terrible. I'm sorry. And he talks about how he saw fear in Moxley's eyes at World's End when he came out. So then the first match in the new era of Dynamite, if we're calling it that, the Max era, I guess, was Orange Cassidy versus Hangman Page. So maybe the thinking was, this has been two of our steady regular guys for a long time. Okay. I keep saying this, Hangman, the fans want to cheer him. So the new badass Hangman, he might as well just become a babyface in my estimation. I mean, Swerve got over when he was, breaking into Hangman's house and threatening his baby in the crib, and now Hangman got over because he burned down Swerve's house, childhood home, while he watched and cried. So I guess in AEW, the more evil you are, the more over you're going to get with the fans, and the more liked you're going to be. So anyway, big cowboy shit chants. They started off the match with Hangman no-selling Orange Cassidy's forearms. The announcers were putting over the fact that AEW Year 1 is available on Max. And that's interesting because I'm thinking to myself, what a different product that's going to look like. They were in like bigger arenas. Excuse me. There was, Cody Rhodes was there. You're going to see all different people. So very interesting if they did get new eyeballs on the product. Hopefully they didn't run into my problems with not being able to find it and then it being stuck in Spanish. And then on top of that, the comparison to the Year 1 to now, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work in their favor. But, as we figured, the library will be there. So Year 1 is there. But back to the match. Outside, they had... They did a thing again that I always talk about in AEW. They're outside of the ring too long. I don't know what the refs are doing at this point. Hangman is sitting in the chair. Orange Cassidy gives him 10 punches. So right there, logic would say, if the crowd can count to 10 for 10 punches, then logically they both should have been counted out, right? Hey, maybe that's just me. But that was just one spot I just wanted to talk about. Anyway, I'm not going to cover the whole thing in depth. Hangman ended up winning with a buckshot. That's the right result. I mean, come on, with Orange Cassidy already. And Hangman needs to keep winning. And for me, he's one of the few kind of interesting guys, I guess, on the show. After the match, he attacks Orange Cassidy and gives him 2 dead eyes. And the officials come out, and Christopher Daniels comes out, and he also lays out Christopher Daniels. Then they go to a backstage promo with Jay White. I still think nobody's buying into the babyface Jay White. It's my opinion. But if there's anyone that they'll cheer him against, it's definitely Wheeler Yuta, who just everybody hates and wants off of their TV screen. He's talking about how Yuta cost him in the big match at World's End. And so get ready, folks, for the big Jay White and Wheeler Yuta feud. Then we go to the Acclaimed versus the Hurt Business. I'm sorry, the Hurt Syndicate. I'm going to keep doing that, I guess. Caster came out covering his mouth and wouldn't rap, and I was saying to myself, why? I mean, lately his raps have been kind of stupid and awkward anyway, since this new character he's playing, I guess. They did a taped interview in the back, and it's with Bowen saying, hey, did you mean to hit me with the belt when I was fighting Jericho? And Caster actually was kind of funny. It was kind of logical. He was like, now? You're asking me this now? Like, as we're in the middle of a taped interview? And I don't understand why, in the world of wrestling logic, like, most people just kind of overlook that. It's just kind of assumed that nobody talks to each other until they get in front of the camera. But, yeah, in real life, these guys would have talked before then, all week long. So, that was, I guess, kind of a meta joke by Caster. So, the Hurt Syndicate comes out. The whole crowd is cheering, is singing along to "We Hurt People." They are super over. I just hope that AEW does not fumble this. I already think they fumbled a little bit by having Shelton in the Continental Classic and having him I think he's taken 3 or 4 losses already, which, man, he should not have. I can understand the loss to Swerve, maybe, if you had to book that. But that probably should have been it with how over Shelton's been and everything. But anyway, that's done. We can't do anything about it now. It's just my 2 cents. Lashley jump-started the match while the Acclaim were arguing. He just jumped on them and started taking them both out. MVP went on commentary, continued to bury Caster further, just like he did with Ricochet, and say, yeah, you know what? We did give him that card, but we don't want him no more. So basically, Caster just sounds like a piece of trash. At one point, Caster did a blind tag to Bowens, and that made them argue some more. And then Lashley just grabbed Caster in the Hurt Lock while Bowens walked off kind of deflated and pissed off at Caster. So that was kind of a heelish move, I thought, but whatever. So I don't know what they're doing with Caster. It's like he's the latest wise ass that's just going to get his ass kicked, and I don't understand why they didn't just leave the Acclaimed as they were. I mean, yes, they were a little stale compared to how they were a year ago when they were super over, but I think it's got to be better than what... I mean, what are they going to do? Is Caster going to be an ineffective heel that just gets bitched out? And is Bowens going to have a singles babyface career? Like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the end game is here, but it's not good. Swerve is backstage. He says he has to apologize to all the people that have been saying his name for all year. He hasn't been the same Swerve lately, but that changes tonight because he's going to win the three-way, which puts him in the Casino Battle Royal. So basically, the three-way tonight is the winner gets number one, because in the convoluted rules, the match can end at any point in time, which I always said made no sense to me. For example, last year, Ricochet debuted in the match. So if someone had pinned somebody, right, in the match before he came in, I guess his debut would have just been scrapped. That's just one small example. I really hope that somebody revamps this, because it makes no sense, and also revamps the Continental Classic into just a normal big tournament next year. Jamie Hayter versus Julia Hart. So this was the feud that nobody's sure why it started. Julia Hart just came back and decided she hates Jamie Hayter. I wrote that they had a really weird slow pace. I don't think they had good chemistry with each other. The crowd got very quiet. At one point, Julia Hart, I'm not making this up, folks, if you didn't watch it, grabs the arrow that she's been shooting in the promo videos, grabs the arrow and pretends she's going to, I guess, stab Jamie Hayter with, and Aubrey Edwards stops her, takes the arrow, gives her kind of a talking to, and then does this thing that they do a lot with, and it's not just AEW, but they tend to do it more, where the referee, for some reason, takes an extra 5 seconds to go place something in the corner. While she does that, Julia Hart mists Jamie Hayter in the face and gives her her finishing move and wins the match. I would think if you took an arrow into the ring to stab someone and the ref had to stop you, they just ring the bell right there. Maybe that's just me. Then we go to the Omega and Okada recap of when Kenny Omega showed up, handed Okada his belt, and just walked off. But it says Kenny next week, so Kenny will be back next week. So that's good, because I think they desperately need him. They need some star power big time. There was an Okada package, and there was a pre-tape of him talking about how he beat Ospreay and called Kenny Omega a bitch, like he does to everybody. Then there was a Mercedes Moné celebration. She came out. There was a whole 2024 video about all the great things she's done in 2024. And she's going to wrestle. She's going to be at Wrestle Dynasty, and she's going to fight Mina Shirakawa for the Rev Pro Championship. So I don't even know if people know what Rev Pro is. Most people, especially the new people that might have turned on AEW and Max if they could find it and it wasn't in Spanish. And that was it, and she left. So I thought something was going to happen, or they were going to set this up with Mina, and they didn't. There was a hurricane relief package. That was nice, and they showed a bunch of video of Dax handing out checks to various charities in North Carolina. So that was nice touch. That, you know, I'm sure Tony's helping out the people there in North Carolina. There was an Undisputed Kingdom backstage talking about 2025 is going to be a big year for them, and Roddy's in the three-way tonight, the same one that Swerve's in, and speaking of that match was next. So the three-way for the number one spot in the Casino Gauntlet, Roddy versus Swerve versus Jay White. I wrote that Swerve was dominant early. There was a lot of whose house chants. Okay, so this next part, I'm just commenting on some key points here in the match. Now, I want people to remember that this is the first big simulcast on Max. So you potentially have a lot of new eyeballs, maybe people that didn't have cable or Hulu TV or YouTube TV, are like, hey, maybe I'll check out that AEW wrestling. And this is what they saw in this match. Ricochet's in the crowd. He pulls out big giant golden scissors and stabs Swerve on the top of the head in the middle of the match. So Swerve goes down. Obviously, he's going to juice. We all knew it, but they didn't show it right away, like immediately. And I thought to myself, please tell me this isn't like rock, paper, scissor, like scissor beats paper because he had toilet paper on him. I don't know if that's what they're going for, but that's what I thought of. And boy, that makes this even more stupid if that's what they're doing. While that was happening, back in the ring, because there's no disqualification in a three-way, White pinned Roddy with the Blade Runner. So he's going to be number one in the gauntlet match. We go back out. Swerve's juicing all over the place. Ricochet still has the scissors. Nana tries to stop him, and Ricochet kind of makes a threatening gesture with the scissors. I guess he was going to stab him to death if he hits Swerve with the scissors to the head again, and he's, really grinding the scissors into his forehead. The crowd's chanting, "You sick F." I'm saying F. They didn't say that. They said all four letters. Nana goes to stop him with a chair, and Ricochet takes the chair and hits Nana. Now there's blood all over Ricochet's white clothes. Ricochet headbutted him a few times, so they a la Ospreay and Fletcher on the pay-per-view. So now he's got blood on his head and face. He's got blood all over his white clothes he's wearing. Like I said, you got some new eyes right now on the product. And this is what you're doing. I don't understand why. And then back in the ring, Ricochet puts Swerve in the ring. He takes the chair in. He sits Swerve in the chair, and then he goes off the ropes and does his spirit gun. And then the Undisputed Kingdom came out and saved Swerve for some reason. And that was the end of that. So, a lot of new eyeballs, potentially. And you gave them a bloodbath with blood all over a guy's white clothes, stabbing a guy in the head with scissors. So, I hope the kids didn't watch. So, Jeff Jarrett's backstage talking about his big night. And Karen Jarrett always seems to find a way to get on the camera, and she is giving Jeff his boots and saying, hey, we support, we all support you. He's back there with his whole crew, Lethal and Sanjay and the Giant. And so then they had Mariah May backstage promo, just kind of cutting a promo on the whole women's division, and she's great. Her promos are great. I mean, I think she's one of the real good bright spots, I think, in AEW. She's got a lot of range. She was a really good face, but she's a really great heel, I think, with that accent and the way she talks and her attitude and the way she carries herself, and she's a good wrestler. And so I can't say enough about her. She's definitely a big bright spot in AEW. Then we go to the ring, and Jarrett comes out, and this big Double J chants. He's got his boots hanging over his shoulder, which is obviously the universal sign for retirement when a wrestler leaves his boots in the ring. Big Double J chants. He cut a whole promo going into the Jarrett family history. Talked about how he started a company. That got some TNA chants, a smattering. When he talked about hinting at maybe it's time to retire, there was a lot of no chants. And then he said, should I retire? Hell no. And he says he's re-signed with AEW, and he wants the world title, and he's jumping into that gauntlet match next week. Well, I hope Jay White doesn't pin another guy before his number's called, because it won't matter. It'll mean shit because he won't get in the match. But his New Year resolution is he wants the world title. So he's not retiring. So if you believed he was, you just got swerved. Then they did a Hook and Patriarchy recap. This is still going on. Hook was sitting on some stairs somewhere and did a promo in Christian versus Hook in 2 weeks. I think it's on the Maximum Carnage Dynamite, they're calling it. So I don't know if it's going to be like Spider-Man, Carnage, and Venom are going to show up and have a big fight. I'm kidding. If you're a comic fan, you probably thought that was hilarious. No, probably not. Then they had Hobbs fight two local talent. One guy was like really hamming it up, I guess, shall we say. But Hobbs just beat the shit out of both of them and spine busted them and pinned them both. So, I guess they wanted to do something here with Hobbs after he lost at the pay-per-view to Takeshita. I personally wouldn't have booked Hobbs yet against Takeshita. I said that on my recap of the pay-per-view. I would have had Hobbs win out for at least a month if he was going to take the pin and had Takeshi to fight somebody else in the meantime. I just give Takeshi the night off. I mean, the AEW pay-per-views are like 4 hours as it is, or 5 if you cut the pre-show. So, but that's what they decided to do. Marvez is in the back. He's with Big Bill and Brian Keith, and they get interrupted by FTR and Cope. And they go back and forth, and basically what's going to happen on Collision is rated FTR versus the Learning Tree. Jericho wasn't there, but there's a potential for, don't get me wrong, Jericho is not what he once was, and neither is Cope, but I think there'll be some intrigue for people like, oh, Edge and Jericho back in the ring together. Then they went to an MJF promo that was taped after World's End, and he still had blood on him, and he's saying that things are going to stop making sense again, and he's closed the chapter on Better Baby. Thank God. That actually got cheers when he said it. He wants his championship back, and he's saying Moxley's calling himself the king, but what's a king to a god? So this is getting a little interesting now. At the top, you've got heels and faces, and, you know, look, I'm not a fan of the Death Rider stuff, but I am intrigued by, I like when a lot of guys are chasing the world title, and the world title kind of feels important, so that's good. Okay, so the main event was the Death Riders versus rated FTR. There was no Pac. I wrote that Cope was over. They were in North Carolina, where he and FTR are from. There was a lot of FTR chants. There was a lot of Let's Go Adam chants. I guess they didn't get the memo. It's supposed to be Let's Go Cope now. There was actually AEW chants during this match. So the fans were into this. I wrote that Dax hit a nice back suplex on Yuta off the top rope. Cope and Mox had a whole exchange where they brawled through the crowd. White ran in when the referee was distracted and gave the Blade Runner to Yuta to get a little payback. So Jay White was all over the show. Cope jumped on Mox through the guardrail, and eventually Yuta took the pin after the Shatter Machine and the spear from Cope. So I thought it was a helter-skelter Dynamite. I thought it should have been better for their first big one with the whole simulcast with Max. I personally would have done more. But maybe their options were limited. I don't know. I mean, there was no MJF was off. They kept Kenny off till next week. They've got guys wrestling in Japan instead. So I don't know. I thought this should have been a better show for the first big show on Max. My opinion. Okay. All right. We're going to get into Collision. But if you haven't, please like, subscribe, comment, follow us, do all that good stuff. Collision on January 4th. So this was the first Collision that was simulcast on Max. I actually didn't go on Max for this, so I don't know how that experience was. Leave me a comment, please, if you did, and let me know if your experience was better than mine. I noticed Elton John was back. So they opened with the cold open with the promos, like kind of like the old Saturday Night's Main Event. So this reminds me of when Punk was still booking the show. So Briscoe and Garcia promos. So if you had to have your champion lose in the Continental Classic to Jay Briscoe, I'm sorry, to Mark Briscoe, I guess then this is the best you could do with this, is say, all right, Mark Briscoe should get a title shot then, right? You pin the guy. So they have promos on each other. The Learning Tree and 8 rated FTR cut promos on each other. And then we went back. So Elton John's back. So that's good, because that new theme they had really wasn't good in my estimation. Now we still just have to get rid of I'm So Excited on Wednesday. So TNT Championship, Briscoe and Garcia. Nothing really wrong with this match. It was really hard hitting. It was, very good wrestling match. I liked the touch. I've said this before, and AEW's done this a few times, where they did the 2-minute warning as they were approaching the time limit for the title match, and Garcia ended up winning with a roll-up. I like that, because if you only do it when there's going to be a draw, then you're basically telling us every time there's going to be a draw. So I will give AEW their credit for that. Kudos to them. They've done that a few times now, where the timekeeper's giving the minute warnings, but the match still has a real ending, so that's good. There was a Yuta promo about Jay White in the back, and Mox basically shuts him up, and then he talks about FTR and Cope. They did a whole recap on the whole Double J situation on Dynamite, and then he fought Aaron Solo, and he won after giving him the stroke twice. They did a whole Ricochet and Swerve recap. I'm just going to blow through some of this because Collision, let's face it, isn't that important anymore. Rush in Action Andretti versus Private Party. This was, a pretty good match if you like the high-flying stuff. There was, really not that much wrong with it, I would say. Darius Martin ended up running out and breaking up an illegal pin where Action Andretti was trying to hold the ropes, and he jumped in and hit his hands off the ropes without the ref seeing it somehow. And I wrote that Isaiah Cassidy ended up winning with a roll-up when he rolled up Action Andretti after all that took place. They did a recap of the Death Riders taking out Darby Allin. In the back, Cope, as he's known now, was with Lexi, and she asking him what his issue was with John Moxley. He said, "You attacked my friend, you have a problem." Jericho interrupts him, says, "Hey, don't forget about me." And they go back and forth and talk about their history, and Cope basically says that, "I remember now that I think you're an asshole," and he walks away. And then Jericho said, "Yeah, well, Cope is a dope, sick burn." All right, and then we had Toni Storm versus Deonna Purrazzo. They've been playing that up, that Toni Storm doesn't remember who she is. Toni Storm won with a small package, so they're still doing the thing where Toni Storm has lost her mind and has amnesia. They did a Hangman. They did the whole recap where Hangman took out Christopher Daniels again in the back, and then Christopher Daniels kind of got in his face in the backstage area, and Hangman basically told him off and told him he's an old man and why would I want you as a friend, and just berated him and belittled him. And then Christopher Daniels, and he slapped him in the face, and then Christopher Daniels snapped and attacked him and gave him a bunch of headbutts. And I guess what happened was when Hangman gave him the slap, he really oversold it, and the camera panned just to Hangman. I guess that gave him enough time to, you guessed it, folks, blood again. And so now we're doing blood in a backstage segment where Christopher Daniels is headbutting Hangman over and over again and juicing. So I guess this is going to be a thing, the Hangman and Christopher Daniels feud. I'm okay with it if it's just going to be another one for Hangman. I don't see what other value this is going to have. They show the Acclaimed argument from after Dynamite. There was a $100,000 challenge. This was some good kind of old school booking here, where we're going to have a match and 4 guys are going to fight for $100,000. Now, I'm not crazy about everybody that was in the match. It was kind of a hodgepodge thrown together thing here. It was Beast Mortos versus Brian Cage versus Commander versus Dante Martin. I jokingly wrote the best part of the match was Layla Gray coming out. Alright, I'm kidding, but yeah, she is really hot. Brian Cage did win with this new complicated finisher he does. It kind of reminded me of that Moneymaker, that Mercedes Moné. It's not exactly the same, but I was happy to see Brian Cage win. I always thought that they really dropped the ball. I remember when he first came in with Taz, I had really high hopes for him. The problem is they did this thing that they do a lot in wrestling. They hot shot a guy straight to the world title. So he comes in, he goes right to Mox, when Mox was the champion at the time. Mox was the babyface. He beats him, and it's been downhill since then. So I from there is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so since then, I just feel like they have not met Brian Cage's potential. I'm not saying he's, the second coming of The Rock or something, but I think he's talented enough, and he's a big, great-looking athlete, and he can do some cool stuff at his size. I just think he should have been more. So if this is going to start something with Brian Cage, then they have my attention a little bit. So I'm hoping that they will go somewhere with him. He's part of the Callis family, even though Don Callis was nowhere to be found in this, unless I missed something. They go to the back, and FTR's with the Rock and Roll Express, who were there, and it was kind of this awkward thing where FTR's like, "Oh, I hope you forgive us, because the last time we saw you, we kind of spiked pile drived you and almost killed you, and the Rock and Roll Express are old men," and they kind of were like, "Oh, it's water under the bridge." So okay, I guess that's over with. The Outrunners then interrupted, and this actually made me laugh, I have to admit. The Outrunners were talking about how the Rock and Roll Express still owe them gas money from a road trip in 1982, which, the Rock and Roll Express are looking at FTR saying, "What's wrong with these guys? Weren't they like little kids then?" And then they did the "you son of a bitch" Predator handshake, Outrunners and Rock and Roll Express, so that got a chuckle out of me. I'm happy for the Outrunners. I mean, these guys let's face it, got themselves over with a pretty inventive gimmick, and so hey, I'm rooting for them. I'm not saying I want them to reign on top of the tag team division forever or anything, but I'm glad that they got themselves over the way they did, and I think they're very entertaining, and the fans like them, and they actually look good. They're actually built guys, unlike a lot of the roster, and the fans are really taken to them. So good for them. All right, so the main event was the Learning Tree versus Rated FTR. Jericho and Cope start the match. That got some chants. We had some Jericho chants and actually Y2J chants, so kind of retro. And then Jericho just tagged right out. And then, I'm just going to go over the main points of this match. It wasn't like exactly a great match. One thing I noticed was Jericho and Cope got in when they did face off again. This time they actually did face off, and they did the whole chop exchange, and I think Jericho ended up breaking the eyes, but then Cope took over. The whole match broke down with all 6 guys fighting at one point. The heels all took over on Cope. I wrote that Bill was fighting off the faces, and Bill looked good. His body looks even better. I think he's still, not that he looked bad before, but it looks like he's tightening up even more, putting even more muscle on. He's another guy, Big Bill. I mean, they got to do something with this guy. He looks great. He can actually talk somewhat now. He's a decent wrestler in the ring. I mean, as good as you can expect for a man that big. I really hope that they do something with him. I just think that AEW has not known what to do with the big guys. The list goes on and on. Him, and I just talked about Brian Cage and Wardlow and Hobbs, and I mean, there's so many that have potential here. I even thought Nick Camarado, when he had the crazy hair and the beard, had some potential to go somewhere and do something with him. But anyway, that's my little detour. Back to the match. So Bill looked good, and I hope that they continue to do something with this. Brian Keith hit Dax with the belt, and the ref was supposedly not going to see this off a Jericho distraction, but clearly the ref did. So again, another thing that AEW does too much of. They just need to be a little more polished with these kind of spots, or with their timing or whatever. Rated FTR ended up getting the pin on Jericho, which surprised me after the Shatter Machine and the Spear. I didn't think Jericho would take the pin. I thought it would be like Brian Keith, but okay. And so that was okay, that match. I mean, a little nostalgia, but Jericho isn't what he was, and I say that with respect. He's one of my favorites of all time. And Copeland still has a good build and looks good, but he's older too. Then they go to the back. This was the eye roll. I rather the show just ended right there, but instead they did a thing where Moxley has the Rock and Roll Express duct taped to some kind of metal staging or something in the back, and their mouths are duct taped, and the Outrunners see this happening and they run to their aid, but the Death Riders take them out with steel chairs, and then the Death Riders run away when they see Copeland and FTR coming, and they went off the air with Rated FTR all pissed off because their friends, the Outrunners and the Rock and Roll Express, got beat up by the Death Riders. So I guess it's going to be a weekly thing where the Death Riders abduct somebody, or duct tape somebody, or pour bleach down somebody's throat, or something stupid. I don't know. But so that was the first week of AEW being simulcast. I thought both shows could have been a lot stronger, especially for this, but I think unfortunately the timing of Tony letting all these big stars go to Japan, and just people not available, and I don't know what MJF was doing, but I thought it was a little bit of a letdown. I'm going to talk about the Raw on Netflix. I'm not trying to compare they were never going to do what WWE can do with the star power and stuff. I'm not expecting that, but I thought it could have been better. So I'm a little disappointed in AEW for this first big week on Max. I just thought there was potential to do much more and have some bigger matches. I think they put way too much into Rated FTR and the fact they were in North Carolina. I'm not saying I wouldn't have those matches, but I think they needed a lot more than that. So that's it. I just think a subpar week for AEW. Also questionable decisions, like, again, the whole Ricochet, scissors, blood everywhere for potentially some first-time viewers. Probably shouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But that's it. That's my thoughts. A week that could have been better, in my estimation. So let's look forward to next week. Kenny's back. Hopefully they get some momentum. And if I would really like to hear from folks if they had problems with Max like I did. If they did, I hope they straighten that out for next week's Dynamite. And for the love of God, Max, can you at least put a little banner or something about AEW on your homepage? I mean, Jesus, this is supposed to be a big deal. They're your partners. I just don't get this. I mean, if I was Tony Khan, I'd be pissed off about this. It's supposed to be a big deal, and people shouldn't have to search for AEW. You should be, if you're a casual person, you should be able to click on it, Max, in my opinion, and go, oh, hey, AEW, that's that other wrestling. It's the other one, not WWE, the other one. Oh, maybe I'll check that out. But you wouldn't even do that unless you were specifically searching for it. So, again, I'd like to hear from people. If they have a different experience or if they fixed it by now, let me know. But anyway, that's my opinion on all things AEW. Should have been better, but it is what it is. Again, please like and subscribe. Please comment. And please give us a follow wherever you get your social media fix. But I'm Jason Medeiros, and I appreciate all of you who are listening. Thank you so much. We're still growing. We're still new. And I appreciate all of you that are supporting me. So I will catch up with you guys next time. I will be dropping my thoughts on WWE, the big Raw debut on Netflix, and SmackDown. And they're both 3 hours, so yikes. I will do the best I can with that. I don't know if I have time to break down 6 hours of wrestling for one company in depth, but I will definitely cover the main stuff. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.